Good evening. My name is Mary Zahler, Voter Services Vice President of the League of Women Voters Grosse Pointe. Tonight's forum is a joint production of the League of Women Voters Detroit and the League of Women Voters Grosse Pointe. The League of Women Voters is providing this forum as an opportunity for candidates to express their views related to their candidacy. Statements expressed by the candidates are not endorsed nor opposed by the League of Women Voters. Also, the League of Women Voters does not certify any candidate responses to questions as being accurate. Voters are encouraged to fact-check information shared at the forum. I'm pleased to welcome the candidates for the Michigan House of Representatives 10th District. This event is being recorded and will be available to be viewed on the Detroit League website and YouTube, and the Grosse Pointe League's YouTube, Facebook, and website. We have 3 candidates for the Michigan House 10th District. All candidates are present for this forum. In alphabetical order, Mark Corcoran, Toni and Joe Tate. Questions from the public have been gathered from both leagues' websites and Facebook pages, local newspapers, and from tonight's league participants. League members have sorted the questions and have eliminated irrelevant, redundant, and slanderous questions. I would like to introduce the following Grosse Pointe League members who are serving in the following roles. Our moderator is Joan Richardson, who is the Program Vice President for the Grosse Pointe League of Women Voters. Our timekeeper is Deb Sloss, Grosse Pointe League of Women Voters, and our Zoom tech coordinator is Judy Florian, League of Women Voters, Grosse Pointe. The League of Women Voters is a national organization whose mission is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League neither endorses nor opposes candidates or political parties. We welcome those age 16 or older to join our membership. Our moderator, Joan Richardson, will now outline the format for the evening and lead tonight's forum.
Thank you, Mary. Good evening to everyone. The League of Women Voters of Grosse Pointe has established the format for this forum. All candidates received and reviewed the format before the forum. Each candidate will have the opportunity to make an opening statement not to exceed 2 minutes, and the order was determined by drawing lots just before the forum began. The timer will hold up a card to indicate 30 seconds remaining and a card indicating stop when the time has expired. When time is up, the candidate may finish only that sentence. Following their opening statements, the candidates will be answering written questions submitted by the public and by league members. Candidates may not make personal attacks on other candidates. Such attempts will be cut short. As moderator, I am in charge of the forum at all times, and I reserve the right to close the discussion on any question. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond. We will rotate the first person to answer the question. Each candidate will then have the opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement in reverse order of the opening statements. Candidates should be aware that voters are being encouraged to fact-check information shared at this forum. So we're going to begin with the candidates' opening statements. As a reminder, each candidate has 2 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Corcoran.
Hi. I want to thank you all for doing what you do, because I do use your voting guide often over the years. My name is Mark Corcoran. I live in Grosse Pointe Woods. I'm originally from the west side of Detroit. I've been married to a beautiful lady, Mexican lady, Noemi, for will be 38 years coming up. Beautiful, lovely Christian woman that, by the grace of God, she stayed with me after all these years. I'm not a politician. I'm a contractor. I got more work than I can handle. I don't even have to advertise. I do good work. This isn't a commercial. I'm just saying that we're at this time in our society where if somebody's just hardworking and has a skilled trade, it's a good thing. And I'd like to see a lot of young people get back into the trades. When I was a young man, we had shop classes in all our schools. And nowadays I hire these kids, some of them are even part-time college students and can't read a tape measure. I'm wondering what's going on with our education system. I'm running not because I wanted to. I asked a lot of other people in the Republican Party to run. But I just feel it's an obligation to do my part. And I got some good ideas about education and crime that can really help this community. And people kind of pushed me into doing this. So here I am.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Ms. Mua?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Toni Mua. A lifelong Detroiter. I'm born and raised in the newly redrawn 10th District. I come from a background of business management as well as crisis management. So I wanted to run due to the simple fact that I feel like representation is very much so lacking, not only just here in our state house, but also federally. Representation is honestly only one of the reasons that I'm running. I'm also running due to the lack of pandemic response and relief that we face, affordable and accessible healthcare, the lack of increasing investments for infrastructure, as well as the lack of increasing public safety and awareness. After a short time in the political field, I've actually had the opportunity to be a director of communications for several politicians, and it has been wonderful. However, every time I go into a room, I'm normally the only person there who is a double, triple, or sometimes quadruple minority. And I feel like it's time for someone to come into office who is okay with making people uncomfortable and doing things that are for the people as opposed to these big corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mua. Mr. Tate?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Tate, and currently I serve as a state representative for Michigan's 2nd House District, which covers part of the Lower East Side of Detroit, Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe City, and Grosse Pointe Farms. And before I get started, would like to thank the Detroit League of Women Voters, as well as the Grosse Pointe League of Women Voters, and the time and effort that you all put into this to educate our residents in the area. So I currently am serving my 2nd term in the State House, and my reasons for serving has not changed. It's out of service. My dad was a firefighter at Engine 52 on the east side of Detroit, and my mom was a public school teacher at DPS at Clark Elementary for a number of years. And for me, one day, my father went off to work in the 1980s. He didn't come back home. He died in the line of duty for a city he loved and communities that he loved. And that has stuck with me for all of my life because the community or church, everyone put their arms around us. Prior to my time in the State House, I served in the military. I served in the U.S. Marine Corps, and there I learned just the incredible importance of responsibility and ensuring that we remain responsible to others. And that's what I would like to continue doing in the state legislature. I currently serve as a minority vice chair of House Appropriations, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that and the work that we've been doing in the state of Michigan for the residents. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for those opening statements. We're going to move now to the written questions that were submitted from the public and from league members. And we will begin with Ms. Mua will begin the responses to the first question. So the first question we're going to start with tonight is one that I think you're all prepared to answer, which is, what is the biggest challenge facing the 10th district in the coming year, and how do you plan to address it? Ms. Mua?
Thank you. So I believe the challenges that are facing the newly redrawn 10th district in the upcoming year would definitely be the lack of infrastructure when it comes to the flooding that has been happening. My family and I all live in the newly redrawn 10th district. We lived here our entire lives, and I can't count on both hands how many times we've had to deal with flooding. And the way that I would actually go about addressing this issue is to listen to the scientists, see how should we move forward, and also listening to the residents and just upgrading our infrastructure to help mitigate the constant flooding. Thank you.
All right, very good, Mr. Tate.
Yes, so our water infrastructure systems have served us well, but have outlived their useful life. There are still pipes and systems, underground infrastructure that have been around for over 100 years in Southeast Michigan, and we are closely sensitive to that being along the Detroit River and Lake St. Clair. Something that I've been working on in the legislature now, we passed an infrastructure bill earlier this year, $4.7 billion. Almost $2 billion of that is for water infrastructure improvements for the state of Michigan, because we know we have outdated systems and flooding issues. It points us in the right direction, but we need to do more with those improvements. So not only that, but looking at other creative ideas around green stormwater infrastructure, funding for our municipalities, also private interventions with lateral sewer lines, check valves, sump pumps to ensure that we won't have a public health problem if we have these flooding issues. We want to keep water out of the basements and off the roads.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Corcoran?
Yeah, my view on it is they hire a lot of bureaucrats to do all that stuff. Nobody knows about construction. Nobody really knows about roads and are controlling what's going on. I mean, fiberglass rebar just in the roads would make wonders on our bridges and our overpasses and stuff, but nobody wants to even look at it at MDOT because everybody's just a bureaucrat and wants to do everything the same way. The other thing is schools. We have to educate our children, not just on why Susie has two mothers. We have to educate our kids on basic shop classes, get them into. A lot of boys don't want to know what an adverb is for 20 years. They need a skill. They need so they can come out of high school and be prepared to have a job and have some common sense. We've lost common sense in our school systems. We got lawyers and bureaucrats running this whole country. And where are we going? It's going backwards, and the taxes are getting higher every year. We had a chance to lower the gas tax the other day and they didn't do it. That would have been an incredible help if we would have lowered the gas taxes. These politicians never see a tax they don't like. We have to do something about it. Government isn't the answer. They're one of the biggest problems. We got to shrink it with common sense.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Corcoran. We're going to move to the second question, and we'll begin with Mr. Tate responding to this one. I want to build on the your comments about infrastructure here. There are competing priorities, obviously, for infrastructure money from not just this area, but around the state. And how do you propose that the legislators set the priorities for where the money gets spent and who gets to spend it first? Let's start with Mr. Tate.
Absolutely, great question. And the issues that we've had up to this point have been issues that have been plaguing us for years and decades. So we know in terms of where disinvestment has taken place for a number of years. Top of mind is infrastructure investment, both not only water, roads, our grid system that we do have. So that's going to be a top of mind priority. You look at surveys around for engineers, and we know that our road conditions and our water infrastructure systems are lacking. So I think starting with subject matter experts is going to be important. Another item around is housing as well too. How many housing starts? How many affordable and workforce housing units do we have coming online? That's going to be incredibly important as we go into the future. And we have the investments, we have the resources to do it now. So we would like to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Now to Mr. Corcoran for a response.
Yeah, like I said, I tried to get a hold of MDOT years ago about looking into fiberglass reinforcement part. It's guaranteed 100 years. They're doing it in Canada and Europe on their roads and bridges. But the bureaucracy, and this didn't have any, I wasn't even involved in the construction area of roads. I do residential construction, but I knew people in the construction field that were trying to get MDOT to look at this stuff. And it's like pulling teeth. There's so much bureaucracy. People, I'll call you back, call this guy, call this guy. I don't know what goes on, but we got to slow up this bureaucracy and get the people that know what's going on as common sense contractors and engineers that know what's going on and have hands-on experience in this stuff. Just the same with the flooding in the basements. Some of that was just because the pumps weren't working right.
Thank you. Ms. Mua?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
I'm asking, there's obviously competition, there are infrastructure issues around the state. There's competition for infrastructure dollars. So how would you propose that the legislature set priorities for who gets the money and who gets it first?
Okay, so the way that I would move forward into looking at this, I would first ask constituents. I feel like the constituents should be first. And when it comes to anything dealing with funding, they should get to choose where it goes first, because they're always going to say the exact same thing. Put it into the infrastructure, into our schools. If we continue to put the funding into infrastructure as well as our education, we're building a better Michigan for our future generations. And I believe that is what's most important, as opposed to putting it towards anything else.
Thank you. We're going to move to the next question, and Mr. Corcoran, you'll be a first responder to this. Can you identify some projects in the 10th district that you think would benefit from public funding? And what actions would you take to obtain support for any needed state funding to support those projects?
Like I said, I would like to get the trades back in the schools, some apprenticeship programs where these young guys can come out of high school with at least a skill. If we can push this into schools, so these kids aren't thinking, well, I'm 18, I graduated, I got a piece of paper that means pretty well nothing. I don't have any skills. I know what a verb is. I studied Spanish for 4 years, and I can't even order a taco in Mexican town. So we got to get our kids educated and stop the crime, so that these old people can walk down the street at night and be safe. And the drugs are through the roof. How many people are dying of overdoses right now? Just, we have to do something about the crime in the schools, and they go hand in hand.
All right, thank you. Ms. Mua?
Yes, there are currently several different programs and projects that I believe would utilize state funding. And the one that I could think of off the top of my head is a community garden. I forget exactly the name of it, but there's a community garden here over on the Lower East Side in which we teach young children how to garden. And I believe that teaching children agriculture is the best way to move forward, as we can prepare them better for a better Michigan, as well as just a better future overall.
Thank you. Mr. Tate?
So I think, creating and building healthy communities across the district is going to be paramount. As a current state legislator, I can use a real world example. So I was able to advocate and to get $750,000 for the repairs along Lakeshore Road in the Grosse Pointes. We know that is a problem. We know that there has been years of erosion along that road. Again, it points us in the right direction, and there can be minor repairs there. We know that there needs to be more. So going back to the infrastructure piece, I think it's going to be important that we continue to look at investing in our water systems and in our roads. And I have been able to do that as a legislator during my time.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. We're going to move to the next question. Ms. Mu will be the first responder to this one. I think we all know that this is a time of hyper partisanship, and I think all voters want to know how their elected representatives will work with those of the opposite party. Can you describe for me a situation where you have worked across the aisle, whether literally or figuratively, with anyone who's had views different from yours, and how you collaborated to bring about a solution to a problem? Ms.
Okay.
Moore.
Thank you. So I believe that for me, working across the aisle is definitely something that I have to do all the time. Normally, I am the only Black trans woman that walks into a room. Half of the time, I'm the only trans person there. So there's a lot of aggression, or I'll say animosity that comes in from me. So the way that I navigate throughout that is I put all personal issues aside and I decide, what are we here for? What is the long-term goal? And what do we plan to do to move forward? This isn't about personal life choices. This is all about how we can work together to move forward for a better project, passion, or anything like that. So that would definitely be a time, several times actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tate?
Yes, I have two of several examples of just working in a bipartisan fashion. First is around the economic development legislation that we passed in the Michigan legislature to ensure that we're creating careers and jobs as we pivot from internal combustion systems into electrification. So GM announced earlier this year a $7 billion investment, and that the state will be supporting that with job growth, with thousands of new jobs. That was done in a bipartisan fashion, and I was a strong advocate for that, reaching across the aisle. The second is the reopening of Lewis College of Business, Michigan's only HBCU. That was a bipartisan package that I worked with a Republican colleague on the other side, and we got that signed by the governor this year.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Corcoran?
Well, I believe I have a definition of good. And I ask people this all the time, what is good? And I challenge all of us right now to think, what defines good? The politicians, the lawyers, what defines good? And I know what the answer is. And if we can't love one another as neighbors, even when we debate, our country's in for trouble. I was a big fan of Ronald Reagan. I parked cars for him as a young man. And he used to smile and laugh and be loving, even when he disagreed with Tip O'Neill and them. And you guys, a lot of you guys know about that. And that's kind of my goal is I can argue with you, but I'm still going to walk away with love for you and respect, even though I disagree with you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to a sort of a related question. As I say, we all know that there are deep political divides, but there are issues where I assume you believe there's a good chance to reach across the aisle and make progress. And I wonder if you could talk about what those issues are and what's the middle ground that you would support should you be elected. And I'm sorry, we're going to begin with Mr. Tate.
Thank you for that question. There have been a number of issues that I've been able to work on in a bipartisan fashion here in now my second term in Lansing. One is around criminal justice reform, raising the age from 17 to 18 to ensure that children under the age of 18 do not get felonies, because we know that that's such an important issue for us to ensure that they don't get tried as adults, but as juveniles. The second is going to be around public safety. I think everyone wants to, as part of healthy communities, we want to ensure that those communities are safe. And I think there is opportunities in a bipartisan fashion to work on that to ensure that supports are there across the entire state of Michigan.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran?
Yeah, I was a volunteer with our church, Cross Point Church, and we go down to the prisons and talk to these young men on a regular basis. I haven't gone since the COVID because I'm not vaccinated, but we have to reach out to our youth, and it starts with understanding that the broken families isn't the answer. The letting these kids slide when they commit a crime isn't the answer. Slapping these kids on the wrist and letting them go out and sell drugs again isn't the answer. We have some deep moral problems in this country, and everybody's just making up their own right and wrong in this country, and then the wonders why the kids are confused. We got to get back to what is right and wrong, not just making it up as we go. And these kids need guidance, and who are their guiding? Who are their guiding? Their guiding forces nowadays.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. We're going to move on to the next question. And this will be, we're going to have a couple of topics we're going to approach now that are more controversial topics in the state. And the first is abortion. And the first responder to this question will be Mr. Corcoran. If the U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade as we expect, what should happen in Michigan in terms of access to abortion? Mr. Corcoran.
In my view, it's wrong. I'm not one to tell you when life starts. Is it 1 minute before the baby's born? Is it 1 minute after? Is it 2 minutes before? Abortion is wrong. The woman had a choice before she got pregnant. Once she's pregnant, that's a baby. I believe that with all my heart. And the Bible preaches that, God knew you while you were yet in the womb. So how can I go against the Bible? How can I just say, oh, well, I need the woman's vote. So let's, and there's a lot of women that are against it. I've protested abortion many times, and I'm very, very, very against it. And as science comes through, we see that it's wrong. It's a baby. Babies are being born at 5 months and live healthy lives. And we're throwing them in the garbage. I mean, come on, people. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Ms. Mua?
Yes, thank you. So this question is near and dear to my heart, as I started off my political career actually volunteering and being a community organizer for Planned Parenthood, which we all know has access to safe and affordable abortions. So if Roe versus Wade is turned, we have actually a Michigan law from 1931 that will go back into effect. And the way that I believe we can mitigate that is to actually amend it for various reasons, as to rape victims and things like that, just so that we'll still have access to safe and affordable abortions as opposed to just outline abortions, period.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mua. Mr. Tate?
So when it comes to abortion and women's health, it should not be the purview of the legislature as to tell a woman or family what decisions that they want to make in terms of their health. We do have that 1931 law that we've been working on. A number of my colleagues have been working on to repeal that, to end that, because we know that it will have devastating effects, not only on our state, but across the country. And I would say this, the general public is in support of that. They want to allow women to have the right to choose at the end of the day. So the public is in support of this, and we've seen polling, we've seen these surveys, and they want this. So I think we should allow women's right to choose.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. So another issue of great controversy and also very top of mind with people in the state at the moment is gun safety. It's obviously been a concern for many for a long time, but the murders in Uvalde, Texas has, of course, elevated it to the forefront for all of us, I think. So I have a series of questions about this. And the first responder to this will be Ms. Mua. First, I want to know whether you think Michigan's laws are sufficient to protect citizens from gun violence. And if you think they are not, what changes would you propose and vote for?
Thank you for that question. So I definitely don't believe that Michigan laws are okay when it comes to gun law. I am pro-gun. As a Black trans woman, I always have a gun with me for my protection. However, I do believe that we should have universal background checks for the purchasing of guns, and we should also mandate a CCW or CPL class in order for Michigan residents to actually purchase any handguns or assault rifles. I also believe that we should actually raise the age of the purchaser's age for buying guns in Michigan. I believe that will mitigate a lot of safety issues when it comes to issues such as gun violence.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tate?
Many of my colleagues, since I've been in legislature myself, have been working on gun safety legislation. everything from putting in legislation for red flag laws. So if someone does see erratic issues with gun owners, that they can go to the authorities to make sure that they're and have assessments and go to a judge to see if that person is fit to have a weapon system. The second is around gun safety and safety storage. I think we need to have some rules and laws in place for that. And this is something that is, gun safety is near and dear to my heart. As a veteran, I mean, understanding weapon systems and having to deploy them and use them, we know that it is serious. There's a lot of training that goes into it, and we need to ensure that we reduce gun violence across our state.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Corcoran?
Everybody always talks about reducing gun violence, taking guns, making stricter laws, but then these kids are committing these crimes with these guns. They slap their hand and send them right back out on the street. People are caught every day with all these illegally gained rifles and pistols, and they slap them on the hands and let them right back out into the street. Drug abuse and drugs behind a lot of this crime and this shooting. It's through the roof. We have to stop the drugs. We got to get these kids educated again. That's where the basis is. We had gun clubs years ago in our schools and nobody was shooting each other. These kids weren't shooting each other. What has changed? What is our moral standard now that has changed?
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. So a second gun-related question. I'd like to know if you make a distinction between an individual's right to own a hunting rifle versus his or her right to own a handgun versus his or her right to own an assault-style weapon. And we're going to begin with Mr. Tate.
Thanks for the question. Just to start off, again, is serving in the Marine Corps as a veteran, there are differences between assault style weapons and a hunting rifle and a handgun. I mean, there's no question about what and how you've built these weapon systems and what they're used for. So yes, there is a distinction. So I think we should be limiting assault style weapons, and also ensuring too that responsible gun owners are able to have weapon systems and to go hunt and to go protect themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we're the country, the outlier that's having these gun violence incidents, and we look around the world, we look to our neighbors in Canada, they don't have this. And there's one reason for that. And we all know the access to weapon systems.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Response from Mr. Corcoran.
I spent a lot of time with an aunt and uncle up north. All these kids, there was 7 of us. I made 8. And everybody had a gun. They were hunting since they were 13 years old. You could kill just as many people with a shotgun, a bird gun with buckshot in it, than you can an assault rifle, especially in a closed area. It's not the gun. It's the mental state that we're in this country now that these kids are doing it. They're growing up without mother and father. There's no right or wrong. They're not taught right or wrong. Half of them are on drugs. They're smoking dope every day. I mean, that's what the problem is. It's not the gun. And if they do commit crimes with it, they should be punished for it severely so they don't do it again.
Thank you. Ms. Mua?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. I'd like to know if you think there's a distinction between an individual's right to own a hunting rifle versus his or her right to own a handgun versus his or her right to own an assault-style weapon.
Okay, so I do not believe there is a distinction between either of those. They're all under the same category of guns for me. I do believe that once we start getting into different types like hunting versus assault rifles, that there should be more precautions taken into place before allowing someone to purchase them, like being in the military for an assault rifle or having your hunter's license for a hunting rifle. So I believe those are things that we could actually put forth in legislation that would make it a lot safer and so that we understand the distinction between each.
Thank you. My final question that's related to gun control. Specifically, when it comes to improving student and teacher safety in our schools, I'd like to know what more you think the state of Michigan should be doing. And specifically, I'd like to know whether you support allowing teachers to carry weapons in the classrooms and whether you support any restrictions on individuals carrying weapons into the public schools. Mr. Corcoran, you'll begin.
Yes, I believe that they should have that right, just like any other person, to protect themselves. These kids in these high schools, a lot of them, there's so many thugs now in these schools, the teachers are scared for their life. I mean, it's incredible what these teachers have to put up with nowadays because of the mentality of our society and how these teenage thugs are running a lot of these schools. I mean, why shouldn't a teacher have a right to protect themselves? And how many lives would have been saved if a teacher would have had a gun to stop some of these crazies shooting all these mass people? If he would have had a gun, he could have saved plenty of lives. That's my view.
Thank you. Ms. Mua?
So I don't believe that teachers should be allowed to carry on school grounds, nor do I believe that anyone visiting school should be allowed to carry. I believe the way to minimize the school shootings and the violence of gun violence occurring in schools is that we should actually get more security guards as well as metal detectors. I went to a high school and elementary school in which we had metal detectors, and there was never an instance of gun violence because we had those safety precautions to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tate?
So teachers and staff that work at schools, they were trained to be teachers and to educate children and to support children. They aren't taught in gun safety, gun handling. Again, going back, being a veteran, the number of hours we spent on the range and around gun handling is significant. And to put teachers in that position, I think is wrong. I think we need to invest in technology for our schools, ensuring that we have, protective vestibules, ensuring that we do have technologies that can identify people that come in with weapon systems to alert the authorities, the people that trained for these issues. But to put that in the teachers' hands, they have enough going on at this point, but we need to support them with technologies to ensure that gun safety and gun violence is prevented in schools.
Thank you. So moving on to a question that is somewhat related to gun control, an issue that we often talk about in relationship to it these days is mental health. And so my question for you is, tell me how you would grade the state of Michigan in terms of providing high quality mental health services for those who need them. And what would you as a legislator do to improve that situation? And we're going to begin with Ms. Mua.
Okay, so I currently feel like the state of Michigan actually has not given enough access to mental health and mental health facilities or such things like that. I come from Generation Z, which we have a lot of mental health issues, and we weren't taught how to deal with them because the previous generation also didn't know how to deal with them. So I believe that if we get some type of psychologist or anything like that into the schools, that would also mitigate and help access mental health, as well as allowing for different mental health providers to be included under Medicare and such things like that.
Thank you. Mr. Tate?
We need to improve. We've disinvested for a number of years, for decades, when it comes to mental health, and we're seeing that play out as it is. And when we look at COVID and the pandemic, that only exacerbated the mental health issues that we've had up to this point. We've done some things in the legislature, just recently with Oxford, providing funding for mental health resources, but we need to grow that. We did that in the last fiscal year budget as well too, providing mental health counselors and other supports in school systems. But I think we can expand that out to go beyond school systems as well too. What supports are we providing families around mental health? And that ties into healthcare. Are we ensuring that people have access to healthcare and ensuring that they're available, and that's not something that they want to look away from, but they want to engage with our healthcare providers as well too, and that's going to be important as well.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran?
We have more psychologists, sociologists than ever in the history of this country. Is that working? The drugs, the family breakup, that the no definition of right or wrong. These kids are confused. They say there is no God, that we come from monkeys. There is no right or wrong. We invent our own right or wrong. That's what they're getting taught in the schools. And then they wonder why they're confused. And if they're a little hyper, give them a drug. Give them a drug. These kids are lonely. They're broken families stuck in front of a TV all their life, or a computer. They have no families. The drug addiction is through the roof, and our doctors are provoking that with all they're giving out these drugs like candy. So these big kids become addicted. I lost my stepbrother and my nephew to heroin. Why? Why? Psychiatrist isn't the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. So we're going to shift focus a little bit. We're going to talk about voting rights in the state. There's currently a ballot initiative underway to place a question on the November ballot that would embed in the Constitution certain rights regarding voting. Specifically, the Promote the Vote initiative would introduce 9 days of in-person early voting, create a permanent absentee ballot list and online absentee ballot tracking, guarantee that military personnel have sufficient time to return their ballots, and introduce other safeguards to prevent interference with voting. Can you tell me whether you support this proposed initiative? If so, why? And if not, why not? And we'll begin with Mr. Tate.
Well, I certainly support that. And the reason why is when we look at our country, when we look at our state, one of the fundamental principles is that we are a democracy. And I think ensuring that we have as low of a barrier as possible to voting for residents across the state is incredibly important for us. We've known this for a long time. We've seen the data. Our elections are fair. They've been fair. There haven't been significant incidents of fraud, but yet I think there is this narrative that has been perpetuated up to this point. But lowering barriers and access to voting is incredibly important. It's important for the fabric of our democracy and our institutions.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Corcoran.
I'm just worried right now that we're letting it be too easy to commit fraud. There are fraud in every election. I mean, how many people just went to jail in Flint over the fraud, the election officials? 1 or 2 in Flint and 1 somewhere else. They just went to jail for fraud in Michigan, if I'm right. I know Monica Palmer, what she went through with the fraud downtown. It's happening, and we shouldn't let it be easy to commit fraud. And the more loopholes and the more ways there's to vote, I agree with that, but we got to make sure it's safe, and we got to make sure people are valid voters. I talked to a guy a couple years ago. He said he voted 3 times in the last election. He laughed about it. I got it. My father-in-law got a ballot here at the house, and hasn't lived in the state in years. My son got a ballot. He's been in California for years with a driver's license out in California.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Ms. Mua?
Yes, so I actually do support the Promote the Vote ballot petition that's going around. My friends and I actually have been going around collecting signatures for it as well, because we believe that it's important for all Michigan constituents to actually be able to vote early. A lot of the times constituents and just people in general don't have enough time to actually get to the polls, and sometimes the polls are out of place and they're not sure exactly where they are. So allowing the 9 extra days of early voting would definitely be a great thing.
Thank you, Ms. Mua. So I think we've all been experiencing the rising prices lately. higher food costs. Certainly, we've all been buying gas. We've experienced the higher prices at the pump. So tell me what you think the state can do to help minimize the impact of those changes on residents. And we're going to begin with Mr. Corcoran.
Well, I believe they just had a chance to vote down 22, to lower to 22 cents on the gallon, if I'm right. They had a chance to vote lower the taxes on the gallon of gasoline, and they didn't want to do that. They'll probably do it just before the elections, probably. But we need it now. And one of the things is we're supporting a president that has taken away the drilling rights of a lot of companies and the fracking and the pipelines, and it has a consequences. He had a big consequence on the price of gasoline. And people say, well, no, it depends on their political views. But it's the truth. The president had a big part of this problem in this country. We can't support these people that are stopping our drilling. I want to be American-made products and American-made oil.
All right, thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Ms. Mua.
Yes, I believe that there are quite a few things that we could actually do to relieve some of the stress that is on constituents currently. So one would be, of course, suspending the gas tax. Two would be introducing legislation that prevents price gouging. In my area closer to downtown, I noticed that there is a huge influx of price gouging to honestly just help out the business owners because gas prices are so high, and not only our gas prices are high, everything else is going up. So I believe those two things are what we should do. Suspend the gas tax and introduce legislation that would eliminate price gouging.
Thank you. Mr. Tate.
So I look at this in two ways, short term and long term. We know that there are pressures. The rising cost of goods and services are there, and that's a real thing. The first thing around short term is providing direct relief to residents of Michigan. There was a proposal that has been on the table about direct relief checks to families so they can put food on the table and that they can cover their costs and their bills. The second is, what are we targeting in terms of tax relief? I think there is an option around some sort of holiday, gas tax holiday. We have to be thoughtful around that. And then second is around earned income tax credit as an option as well too, increasing that for working families who have trouble being able to pay the bill. So I think that's an opportunity for the long term. That's something that can be sustainable in this state.
Thank you to all of you. So this question is a real question from a real member of the public, and I love the way that it was phrased. We all know that you bring certain gifts. Everyone has their own gifts and talents they bring to bear in any situation. And this person wants to know, what's your superpower? And what will you bring to your work in the legislature? And how will you wield that to the benefit of the residents of the 10th district? So I'm going to start with Ms. Mua on this question.
Okay, yeah, so as I've mentioned before, I actually have an expertise in crisis management. So I would say my superpower is managing crisis, especially during a time where I feel like several communities are facing unprecedented attacks in our state legislature. And that honestly is the greatest gift of all, because not only do I remain sane and cool under pressure, but coming from a gigantic immigrant family, I am certainly sure that I can maneuver things around and keep peace around everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Tate, what's your superpower?
That's a great question. I would say it would be around consensus building in the legislature. So in the House, there are 110 members that have different experiences, come from different walks of life. But we all have to get there. We all have to work together towards a common goal. So under that, with consensus building, is listening, like understanding where people are coming from. I think that's allowed me to be effective in the legislature to bring resources back to the second House district, but also for support statewide. So I think consensus building is incredibly important. I think that's something that I would consider as superpower.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Corcoran, what's your superpower?
I'm not even a good man. If there's any superpower, it's God. That's why I hit my knees every day and I pray to God, God, have grace on me and show me what to do every day. I read the Bible and that's my guide for everything I do every day. Because I don't know. All I know is God is the only one that's good and not the God we invent after our own image. There is one God and he's the superpower. And if we don't obey him as a country, we're in trouble. If we don't get back to the Judeo-Christian ethics of this country, it doesn't matter who we elect because nobody's good enough.
Thank you. I feel as if you've worked really hard here and you've answered a lot of questions. So I think it's time for us to close this and allow each of you to have a closing statement not to exceed 2 minutes. As you learned at the beginning, the order of presentation is reversed from the opening statements. So we will begin with Mr. Tate.
Well, thank you. And once again, I would like to thank the Grosse Pointe League of Women Voters and the Detroit League of Women Voters as well, again, for your time and your effort in putting this together. This is certainly no small feat. For me, I think we're all in this together. Everyone matters in the 10th House District. So stretching from downtown Detroit through all 5 Grosse Pointes, you know, as an elected official, there is a responsibility to the constituents and to ensure that we're providing support for healthy communities in the area and opportunity for all. I think my record has shown that. It certainly hasn't been perfect, but I've been able to advocate for resources, not only for expanding childcare for those that need it across the state, but as I mentioned earlier, providing resources for repairs along Lakeshore Road, also resources for streetscapes along Mack Avenue, as well as supports for parks. We want to continue to do that. We know that we have issues with water infrastructure. That's still top of mind for me. Housing is going to be incredibly important for us as we move forward, and job growth as well too. We want to ensure we have vibrant communities that people want to come and live and raise families in. So I will stick by my record. Want to continue to listen as we go along, and it has been an honor to serve, and I hope I can earn the constituents of the House District 10 their support to continue to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Ms. Mua, your closing statement.
Firstly, I want to thank you all, especially the League of Women Voters, Grosse Pointe in Detroit. Once again, my name is Toni Mua, and of course, I'm a candidate for State Rep District 10. And I just want to remind everyone that we're in a moment in time where we need to rise up for the new generation of leaders to lead us. We need to elect politicians in office who are okay with creating change and being for the people, as opposed to just being in seats just to have a title. We need an economy that works for everyone, which includes raising the minimum wage, paid sick days for all, and protecting collective bargaining. We also need quality education for our kids by securing more resources, as well as fully funding our public schools and improving the literacy for our children, as well as fixing our infrastructure. As Rep. Tate said, the water infrastructure thing is the biggest amongst us all, and I'm quite sure we've all had to deal with flooding in our area, and we more than likely don't want to deal with it again. So vote for me if you guys want to see a progressive politician in office that is okay with listening and not being talked to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mua. And finally, Mr. Corcoran.
I was raised in a working class family, factory rats. We are all construction workers, factory rats, waitresses. And there is nobody out there for the working man. There is nobody. My dad used to say, all lawyers are going to do is make laws to make it easier to sue one another. Then they're going to make you buy all this insurance on your house and car and home, and we can't even afford car insurance. So the lawyers can sue one another with the laws they made. And then when they make with all this insurance, they get the money. At least guys like plumbers and farmers know which way the bull crap should flow. We need some good working class people in there that have common sense, that can say the schools need to be changed, the education system we need to stop the crime. We need to get out in the communities. I've coached inner city hockey. I've gone to the prisons. I was a missionary in Mexico for 5 years. That's how I met my wife down there. It's not only just the lawmakers. We as a society have to say that America is a great country. Our Constitution is good. Don't change it. Let's just get back to it. Love one another and respect one another. Even our views are different. And remember that there is only one good, and that's God. And if we don't obey his laws, we're doomed. And that's what I believe. And I want to have good people around me that have moral virtue and more education and wiser than me, that I'm not afraid to ask them for help and say, what should I do here? What is your opinion on this? I'm not somebody that's just stuck in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. You know, there's some people that vote for Charles Manson if they had their letter R or D after their name. They vote the same party. Give me a chance. I'm a working man that loves people, and I can work together with everybody. And I'll try my best. That's all I can promise you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Thank you to all the candidates. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening. We very much appreciate, as several people have said, your willingness to step forward and to run for public office. It's not an easy job ever, and it's certainly more difficult these days than it used to be. We also want to thank the forum officials and to everyone who's listening tonight. If you still have questions for the candidates, if we didn't cover the topics that you are most concerned about, please get in touch with the candidates directly and ask them the questions yourselves. And now I turn the forum back over to Grosse Pointe League Vice President, Mary Zahler.
Thank you, Joan. And thank you especially to tonight's participants for their commitment to public service in our community. A link to this forum will be available on the Detroit League's website and YouTube, and on the Grosse Pointe League's Facebook website and YouTube prior to the primary. The candidates have also answered questions about their candidacy on vote411.org. The online Vote 411 voter guide covers this and other races, giving you a comprehensive picture of the people running on your own ballot. You can access Vote 411 at vote411.org or the Grosse Pointe League of Women Voters website beginning June 23rd. Election Day is Tuesday, August 2nd. Polls will open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Michigan offers voting by absentee ballot for any reason. You can register, verify your voting registration status, or request an absentee ballot by calling your city clerk, going to vote411.org, or accessing the Secretary of State website. We strongly encourage you to vote early by absentee ballot and return your ballot well before Election Day. If you mail your ballot, allow 2 weeks for it to reach your city clerk. Thank you and good evening.